Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And we have a little ironic story here. Today, of course, is the 4th of July. It's American independence when the ungrateful traitors left the empire. But we're now talking about Britain's independence, our independence from Europe and Brexit. And an academic has suggested such great comedies as Fawlty Towers, Hello Hello, and of course Dad's Army are kind of reflective of why we voted to leave. He's not in any way saying that they caused it, they caused Brexit, but he understands why Brexit happened because of the causality of these shows. These shows in themselves were written because of our attitudes to Europeans in general and foreigners, around the world, really. And so he's saying that because that was our attitude and that was reflected in our comedies, it was no surprise, of course, that we voted to leave because we have a very low opinion of Johnny Foreigner as a nation, And I'm not being racist, I hate racism. Two things I hate, racism and the French. So we're going to go in and have a look at this and see what he's saying, see why he's saying it. It's quite an amusing thing, really. I think he's right in that the comedies come from our deep national psyche and our attitudes to everyone who comes from beyond the borders of this country. Here goes. So, Hello Hello led to Brexit. I'll explain this only once. Historian claims classic sitcoms including Fawlty Towers and Dad's Army could explain the political attitudes behind Britain leaving the EU. Professor Gavin Schaefer has claimed sitcoms help to make sense of political attitudes. In fact, before we get into that, I do remember an absolute classic scene from Hello Hello where Rene is kissing Yvette and his wife Edith comes in and she's, Rene, what are you doing? And Rene says, I am getting a fishbone out of Yvette's throat. And Edith says, with your tongue? And he says, well, my hands were dirty. You had to be there to watch it. But, the shadow in the gatto in the pill in the till. Again, I love Hello Hello. It is absolutely a cracking classic comedy. Obviously Dad's Army. One of the best comedies of all time. And they only made 12 episodes of Fawlty Towers. But everyone remembers the Germans. Anyway, there are classic comedies famed for poking fun at both the British and our European neighbours. But an academic writing in a new book is claiming that sitcoms such as Hello Hello, Dad's Army and Fawlty Towers provide a way to make sense of the political attitudes that prompted Brexit. That's right. I mean, these comedies only existed because our view of foreigners is such that we could write those comedies. If we just accepted them as being very much like us and that, there wouldn't have been anything funny in them. Who would have thought you could write a comedy about Vichy France during the war and have comedic Germans? It's the sort of, it would never pass muster today. And some of the lines they used in these things, because you're not allowed to be funny anymore. Political correctness says you can't be funny because if you say something funny, you're going to get cancelled, and it's just terrible, isn't it? But anyway, and the University of Birmingham historian Professor Gavin Schaefer has contributed a chapter to the book British Humour and the Second World War, Keep Smiling Through. In it, he suggests British people's ambivalence towards Europe and their wish to be different from the continent is portrayed in these shows. I do remember the old thing, there's fog in the channel, Europe is cut off. So that was it. He argues that Hello Hello in particular reflected some of the thinking that lay behind the decision of British people to back Brexit. It wouldn't surprise me if this is true, absolutely, because it was so funny. And this is it. And we watched it, we laughed at it, we laughed at the funny French and their ways, we laughed at the funny Germans in their ways. And so we treated everyone from Europe as a bit funny and a bit odd, and that's because we're British, damn it, man, Anyway, Hello Hello, written mostly by David Croft and Jeremy Lloyd, ran as a pilot on the BBC in 1982. And then aired for 9 series between 84 and 92. It starred Gordon Kay as René Adroit, a cafe owner who reluctantly becomes involved with the Resistance. Among the characters was an undercover Englishman whose failed attempt at French accent were part of the show's running gags, I was pissing by your window. You know, that was the one. Professor Schaefer said many Britons took Hello Hello to their hearts as it presented a light-hearted reflection of European differences that ultimately spoke to the core differences between Britain and her European neighbours. Yes, because they are immensely funny. It's stereotyped everyone, of course. And people moan today, oh, you shouldn't stereotype. But stereotypes exist for a reason. And that is why it worked. Because they took the stereotypes, but they caricatured them. And they pushed the stereotypes slightly further to make them sort of caricatures of what we assume they are. And that was why it was so funny. The show also tells us something about how British attitudes to Europe were changing and not changing in the late 80s and early 90s as Britain edged closer to her European neighbours. But despite closer bonds, British voices of Euroscepticism never strayed too far from suspicions rooted in the Second World War. Quick story, I sat in a bar and there was a German. I was talking to a young lad. I was chatting away to him and that, and I said something about the war. And he just turned around and he said, why do you English always mention the war? And I'm not kidding. To a man, about 5 or 6 men up and down the bar, all looked at him and in unison said, because we won it. I sat there and I roared with laughter. And to be fair, so did he. But it was just the way. All these blokes, all at the same time, just went, because we won it. See, it was funny, but it was true. Anyway, he argues in the book that while Hello Hello can be seen as an attempt to bury the Germanophobia of the Second World War and work through the European trauma it caused, it also highlighted how different people in Britain felt from other Europeans. Oh no, there's Britain and Europeans. You know, Britain isn't Europe. Britain is an island. We're an island nation. We're our own little continent. Yeah. Professor Schaefer also points out that Fawlty Towers' most well-known scene treats the relationship between the Brits and the Europes as the elephant in the room. And the Europe. Oh yes, this is the don't mention the war. I did, but I think I got away with it. The academic added, the argument that there was something specifically British about being able to laugh at yourself was key to much of the public affection for Hello Hello. He added, this helps to explain British-European relations in this period, illustrating the extent to which British people considered their outlook and principles different and exceptional. And it was, and it still is. Continuing affection for this kind of humour points to something of a British blind spot about the legacy of the war and the barriers between Britain and the rest of Europe. The barriers being the English Channel. You know, the channel we crossed, not me personally obviously, but we as a nation crossed to go into France at great extent to save the French from the Germans for the second time in 30 years. Anyway, what lurks in the shadows is a nation deeply ill at ease with its European neighbours. We don't trust them at heart, you know. Listening very carefully to Hello Hello reveals a story of a nation that remains unready for further European integration. And we are, and we were then, and we still probably are. Because I think we still, even though we'd like to be, oh yes, well, we're very nice this and that, you know, and we don't mind the fact we'll pop off, we pop down to Bordeaux and blah, 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 and all that. But we're still British. And we know there is a difference between being British and being any other European nation. I once read I think it was, oh God, who wrote it? P.G. Wodehouse. I think it was P.G. Wodehouse who says, the utter horror of waking up in the morning and remembering you're Belgian. And I just thought that was a funny line. That was an absolutely brilliant line. Anyway, I shall stop there and come up. But yeah, I think he has got a point about the fact that the humour comes out that is based on our national psyche. And so that's why we were always going to go for Brexit, because we are, deep down, rather different from everyone else in Europe. Anyway, coming up. Yeah, I do think that British humour is absolutely unique. We've got a sense of humour that is different from just about everyone else in the world. We can laugh at failure. We can laugh at stupid. If you ever watch, like, German humour is very slapstick, for example. French humour is very wry and dry. American humour is very kind of forced. It has to be explicit and things like that. And it's not, I'm not saying any particular humour is wrong. It's just that they are different. And once you accept that there are those differences, of course, and of course, the other thing, of course, with what we've got is with such a big language, with English, so many words, we can use them in far more subtle ways for humour, and we can get more implications over that. So now it's not a dick showing contest. I'm not saying that we've got the best humour or anything, but I'm saying that we've got a different humour, but because of the size of language, we can be more subtle in the use of that humour than maybe someone with a smaller language. I mean, French is still quite a big language, of course, but some of the Eastern European languages are actually quite small in terms of number of words and things like that. Spanish, quite a small language in terms of number of words. English got over 1 million words, so takes your pick, But also, we tend to be a bit more ironic. And that kind of works as well. So those different humours come out, and I think that is all part of the national psyche, which is why certain sitcoms were so successful, because they were so very clever, as well as being very funny. And I think that's where it is. And so yes, I do think that we would have voted Brexit because we had those sitcoms. They're not causal. Those sitcoms did not make us vote Brexit, but by seeing those sitcoms, by having those sitcoms, it explains our mentality, and you can see why. You look at the humour. That's why they voted, because that's their humour. So maybe we only came out of Brexit for a laugh. That could be a whole new paper. That could be your PhD, couldn't it? Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this video. It made me laugh doing it. And until next time, stay safe, stay well. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and goodbye.